Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank both the Psychosocial Committee and the Nursing Committee for planning this session and for inviting me to participate. In the United States, we have a National Hemophilia Coordinating Center called the NHPCC, and it's been awarded to ATHN, the American Thrombosis and Hemostasis Network. And they request grant submissions for programs of national significance. And I submitted a grant for curriculum development for female relatives of individuals with hemophilia. And the overall goal of that was to improve the outcomes for carrier women and for their potential offspring. And the objectives were that we could identify female relatives of our patients with hemophilia who could be at risk, to educate them about hemophilia, what it is in 2016 and what their risks are, what the genetics of the disease are, to provide resources and information about genetic testing, and primarily to avoid complications, risks to the health of the women and risks to the health of baby boys. We wanted to prepare and disseminate a curriculum to assist providers throughout the country and others in outreach and education. And as you've heard, that these providers are not always trained genetic counselors, so it could be nurses, social workers, or physicians. So we wanted to provide them with the tools that they could use to do this education. The NHPCC did a survey of hemophilia treatment centers in the United States and found out that about 40% of social workers, hematologists, and nurses wanted more information and more help in providing genetic education. There was also a national patient survey that showed only 13% of the patients surveyed thought that they needed genetic testing, and 12% got the services that they needed. Which is a small number, right? And 27% of those that got the services didn't think the services met their need. So we saw a need both in the provider community and the patient community for more information and assistance with genetic testing and genetic education. Now, as a nurse, I have a little different perspective perhaps, but not so different from the genetic counselors that are on the panel or for the social workers. In our region in the United States, we've always had an emphasis on genetics, but in the past 5 years, we've had an increased emphasis. We, of course, have increased availability of genetic testing as new mutations are identified, and we've had some negative experiences in our region with poor outcomes for mothers and babies due to lack of testing or lack of information. We see new parents. I'm sure the nurses and the social workers, everyone in the audience, can think about families that come to us that were completely unprepared. They have a new baby with severe hemophilia or mild hemophilia, and they had no idea that this could happen to them, even though many of them did, in fact, have a family history. We know that genotyping can have benefits in planning patient care, even for the individuals with hemophilia. And we know that patient testing the individual with hemophilia facilitates carrier detection, as you heard earlier. And the most important thing is that we've all seen serious preventable complications when carrier status isn't identified or women don't have the information that they need to get the care that they need or to make the decisions that they want to make. So, for example, in our own region, we had a little baby boy that was born in a community hospital after a prolonged labor and a vacuum extraction. He presented immediately with a subdural hematoma, subdural bleeding that worsened, and before reaching a hemophilia treatment center in 2015, in the modern era, in 2015, this baby boy died from a completely preventable complication. Because the retrospective family history after the baby died, meeting with the family, there was a strong maternal history of factor VIII deficiency. The maternal grandfather had hemophilia. There's another baby that had consequences not as severe, but a full-term baby boy, and I know everyone has seen this, an uncomplicated vaginal delivery, who went ahead to have circumcision. In the United States, circumcision is often done on the second day of life. And he had extensive bleeding after circumcision with a significant drop in his hemoglobin. It required admission to the neonatal intensive care unit, where he was found to have a prolonged PTT and was then ultimately diagnosed with moderate factor VIII deficiency. In this family, a retrospective family history revealed that the maternal great-uncles had hemophilia. So I know this is something that is not uncommon and that we see often, but it really makes us scratch our heads and think, how can we prevent this and how can we make it better? But it's not just the babies that can be affected by the lack of knowledge or the lack of planning. There was in our region also a 27-year-old woman who had her first pregnancy. She had two older relatives that had hemophilia, but that family history was never elicited by her doctors. No one asked her what her family history was in terms of bleeding disorders. And she delivered a healthy baby girl, but the mother suffered significant postpartum hemorrhage, required 3 packed red blood cell transfusions and a partial hysterectomy, again, because she didn't have the care she needed during her pregnancy and delivery. And so this brought us to, we don't all have genetic counselors, as Michelle pointed out, and so with all of the hemophilia treatment centers in the United States needing some help with providing this education, we decided to develop a curriculum to help healthcare providers reach out to female relatives to help them understand their risk and understand the importance of testing and planning. And several of the people who worked on this are in the audience or on the stage. Sue Cutter as the social worker, Michelle as the genetic counselor. And we met with our regional coordinator and another nurse and another resource coordinator to share our resources, because we all come from different places, and see what we had, what we know, and to identify what our goals were and plan for the development of the program. And this group served as the first faculty for the pilot of the curriculum. So we had to prioritize our topics because we couldn't do a week-long curriculum or even a 2-day curriculum. We wanted to get it into a reasonable several-hour segment. We brainstormed some approaches. We wanted to consider how do adults learn, and we modeled it on the CDC provider curriculum called Foundations in Hemophilia. We identified the resources that were already available. For example, our region has a genetics toolkit, and now the NHPCC also has a national genetics toolkit. We used publications from the National Hemophilia Foundation, and we reviewed established regional programs that we had before. We have often have programs in our region that provide education, and although the content is different, the format and the planning were helpful to us. So we developed a flyer, we developed an invitation letter, and we sent it to all the HTCs in our area, as well as other providers who we knew cared for people with hemophilia, to encourage them to invite any female relatives of any of their patients with hemophilia to participate. And we also advertised it in our hemophilia chapter newsletter and website. Once people had responded to their hemophilia treatment centers and applied for the program, we sent acceptance letters and we gave reminder phone calls. We adapted an existing family history survey that's in common use for our purposes, and we sent it to all the registered participants. We asked them to complete the family history survey and send it back so that when they came to the program, each woman would have an individualized family pedigree of her own that could illustrate who might be at risk in her family. And some actually, just by this process, were identified female relatives that had been unknown previously by the hemophilia treatment centers and unidentified by the women in the program as being potentially at risk. And this is an example of the pedigree that we developed for them. So we wanted to avoid the traditional medical model talks. You know, we're all so comfortable with just providing talks. We really wanted this to be an interactive program. We wanted to use case studies. We used these individual family pedigrees. And we used sample pedigrees so that we could look at patterns and have them help us identify who could be at risk in this family, who could be at risk in that family. And then I think an important step is that we developed a facilitator guide so that this program could live on, and it's not something that only we could do, that everybody could use. So it's a step-by-step instruction guideline with time guidelines, materials, handouts, and resources. And so the program can be easily duplicated and provided by really anyone who's interested. So we developed the curriculum. We did a pilot program. We did evaluations. We did pre- and post-test. We revised the content based on the pre- and post-test and the evaluation, and we piloted it a second time, and then we prepared the package for distribution. The content was, of course, introductions, group feedback about what their experiences are. Women wanted to tell their stories, and we wanted to provide that opportunity. We also wanted to importantly talk about hemophilia in 2016. We know that some female relatives have horrible stories that they've heard from their families about hemophilia in 1950 or 1960 or 1990, and we wanted to contrast that with the current status of hemophilia care. We also wanted to talk about symptomatic carriers and get to why does it matter? Why does it matter if you identify female relatives? Does your second cousin really need to know that she's at risk? And so, again, we provided case studies and used audience feedback. Of course, we talked about the genetics of hemophilia and their family history, and importantly, the difference between genetic testing, using DNA testing, and factor levels, because many women say, oh, I'm not a carrier, my factor level was 60%, as we all know. But we also wanted to impart the importance of knowing your factor level if you are a carrier, and to recognize that there are personal preferences, and there's no right or wrong answer about the correct timing for genetic testing. It's a little different in hemophilia than some disorders in that it can affect the health of the female, and so there may be more reason to do it at an earlier time than some other genetic disorders. We provided each participant with a binder that had all the slides, brochures, literature, contact information for the HTC that would be nearest them or nearest their female relative that they'd identified. And so we provided them with a lot of information to take with them and to share. One of the fun things that we did is we did genetic bingo. We used bingo cages, and we identified bingo balls. We assigned them different genes. So normal X was 2 white, and normal, so you can see X, white ball was a normal X, a carrier, red was hemophilia, blue was a normal Y. And so you can see all the different combinations. So we loaded the bingo cages so that the mother and father, knowing what the mother and father was, if the mother's a carrier and the father does not have hemophilia, then the women could take turns spinning the cages and see, oh, you had a healthy boy, congratulations. Oh, you have a daughter that's a carrier. So they could see that the chance repeats with each pregnancy. We could switch it up. The father has hemophilia, the mother's not a carrier. So we used different combinations, and I think the families really enjoyed that, and the women enjoyed it, and really illustrated the chance in genetics. So we pilot tested it in Philadelphia. We had 17 participants registered, 14 attended. The faculty are those that I mentioned, and we provided dinner and parking. And then we did a second pilot in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The evaluations for the programs were actually very good. 100% rated the program as either good or very good, and 55% said they would be more likely to talk to their female relatives about their carrier risk. Now, 18% said they would be less likely, so we're a little concerned about that, but we think that we need to we actually have reworded the question and ask why not, because we suspect, knowing some of the stories, is that some of the women thought people might be at risk who aren't at risk. So we need to clarify that, and we've reworded that question. 55% were more likely to have genetic testing, and 36% already knew their status. And 91% of the participants said that they will use the knowledge that they gained from this program. They all had great comments to make and made us feel like it was worthwhile for us to do the program. So, as I mentioned, we revised the pre- and post-test based on the pilots. We made adjustments to the schedule, a little more time here, a little less time there. And then the second pilot, we only used 2 of our original faculty, and the purpose of that was to gradually wean out our faculty to see if this could live on its own. It's easy for the same 4 people to keep doing it and say it's easy to do. And with the third pilot, which was planned, but due to logistical problems wasn't carried out, we were going to have none of our faculty, service faculty, and one of us be there for questions. But the evaluation's been completed. Final revisions have been made. The facilitator manual has been completed, and the facilitator manual has specific instructions. All the slides are printed. The time frames are included, and there are resources and tips. And all the slides have been put on jump drives and distributed to all of the hemophilia treatment centers in the United States and to disseminate the curriculum, because it really isn't going to be helpful unless it lives on and other people can use it. Besides all the hemophilia treatment centers in the United States, it went to the National Hemophilia Program Coordinating Center at Athens, to all the regional coordinators in the United States, and to the National Hemophilia Foundation. And it has been available for use for any hemophilia treatment center, and it has been used, and we've been getting good feedback about people who have used it. So I'd like to thank all the people who were on the planning committee, who helped develop the curriculum, and to serve as faculty. And then Ed will take over in terms of the question and answer. Thank you very much.